What if I told you some of the most talked about cameras in history turned out to be massive disappointments? From brands you trust to launches that broke the internet, these cameras were hyped as game changers until reality hit. They promised innovation, power, and perfection, but left creators frustrated, confused, and sometimes even betrayed. In this video, we are counting down the top 10 most hyped cameras that failed miserably, and trust me. Number 4, it never even made it to the shelves. Yet it had people lining up before launch. And wait till you see what made it to number 1, it might just change the way you see one of the biggest camera brands forever. So if you're a creator, collector, or camera geek, subscribe to Buyer Blitz for deep dives into the world of camera controversies, top picks, and camera rumors you won't find anywhere else. Now let's begin the countdown. Starting with a camera from a brand so luxurious, you'll be shocked it ended up on this list. Starting at number 10, we have the Leica TL2, a camera that perfectly represents everything wrong with style over substance in the camera industry. Leica marketed this as the ultimate minimalist touchscreen-only mirrorless camera, promising a premium tech luxury hybrid experience that would revolutionize how photographers interact with their gear. This 24.2 megapixel APS-C camera came loaded with impressive specs on paper. It featured Leica's Maestro 2 image processor, ultra-high-definition 4K 30 frames per second video recording, full high-definition 1080p at 60 frames per second, shooting speeds up to 20 frames per second, and an international organization for standardization range extending to 50,000. The 3.7-inch 1.3 million dot touchscreen monitor was supposed to be the future of camera control, paired with a 49-point contrast detect autofocus system and electronic shutter capabilities reaching 1/40,000th of a second. But here's where the dream turned into a nightmare. The touchscreen-only interface was painfully slow and unresponsive, making basic camera operations feel like you were fighting with your gear instead of creating with it. The autofocus system was weak and unreliable, struggling in conditions where even budget cameras performed flawlessly. The overall usability was so poor that most users described it as feeling like an expensive fashion accessory rather than a serious photography tool. The result was devastating for Leica's reputation. Even die-hard Leica fans, who typically defend the brand through thick and thin, completely skipped this camera. Sales were disastrously low, and the camera received minimal updates throughout its lifespan because Leica essentially gave up on fixing its fundamental problems. But wait until you see how a budget camera disappointed even more people than this overpriced Leica disaster. At number 9, we have the Fujifilm X-T200, a camera that proves even beloved brands can spectacularly misread their audience. Fujifilm positioned this as the perfect budget-friendly hybrid camera with a flip screen, intuitive touchscreen interface, and access to Fujifilm's legendary color science. The target was clear: vloggers and beginners who wanted professional results without the professional price tag. The specs looked promising for its price point. This 24.2 megapixel APS-C camera featured ultra-high-definition 4K and full high-definition video recording capabilities, a 2.36 million dot organic light-emitting diode electronic viewfinder, and a 3.5-inch 2.76 million dot articulating touchscreen. It offered international organization for standardization from 200 to 12,800, shooting speeds up to 8 frames per second, and a hybrid autofocus system with face and eye detection. Bluetooth and wireless connectivity were built in, along with electronic stabilization, high dynamic range video, and Fujifilm's famous film simulations. This camera was released at a time when Fujifilm had just impressed everyone with the X-T30, so expectations were incredibly high. The photography community was ready to embrace another Fujifilm success story, especially one that would make their excellent color science accessible to more creators. But the X-T200 turned into one of the most disappointing cameras Fujifilm ever released. The autofocus system was completely unreliable, missing focus constantly and making it impossible to trust for important shots. The 4K video recording suffered from major frame drop issues that made footage unusable, completely defeating the purpose of having 4K in the first place. The camera's performance was so problematic that Fujifilm quietly discontinued it shortly after launch, essentially admitting they had released a fundamentally flawed product. Speaking of disappointments, number 8 promised cinema-grade features but delivered nothing but frustration to filmmakers worldwide. The Sigma FP claimed to be the world's smallest full-frame mirrorless camera, and Sigma marketed it as a revolutionary cinema tool with internal recording options like RAW video and 4K capabilities that would compete with cameras costing 10 times more. This was supposed to be the camera that democratized professional filmmaking. On paper, the specs were genuinely impressive. The 24.6-megapixel full-frame backside illuminated Bayer-complementary metal oxide semiconductor sensor seemed perfect for both photography and videography. It offered ultra-high-definition 4K at 30 frames per second with 12-bit cinema DNG recording, which was absolutely incredible for a camera of this size and price. The 3.15-inch 2.1 million dot touchscreen, liquid crystal display, 49-point autofocus system, and electronic image stabilization system rounded out the feature set. It could shoot at 18 frames per second, had an International Organization for Standardization range reaching 102,400, used an L lens mount, and included USB 3.1 Generation 1 Type-C connectivity, along with micro HDMI 1.4 output. Cinema creators were genuinely excited about this camera because it promised to be a RED camera alternative that you could actually afford and carry in your pocket. The director's viewfinder feature and cinemagraph capabilities suggested that Sigma really understood what filmmakers needed. But reality hit hard when people actually tried to use this camera for real work. The complete absence of a built-in electronic viewfinder made handheld shooting nearly impossible, especially in bright conditions where the rear screen became unusable. The battery life was absolutely terrible, dying so quickly that you needed multiple batteries just for short shooting sessions. Overheating became a constant problem during extended recording, making the camera unreliable for professional work. The user interface was confusing and poorly designed, turning simple operations into frustrating experiences that killed creative momentum. If you think that's bad, wait until you hear about the camera that took years to release and still managed to disappoint everyone who waited for it. At number 7, we have the Zeiss ZX1, a camera that represents one of the most ambitious and ultimately disastrous attempts to revolutionize photography workflow. Zeiss promised something that had never been done before: a fixed-lens full-frame camera with Adobe Photoshop Lightroom built directly into the camera body, eliminating the need to transfer files to a computer for basic editing. The concept was genuinely revolutionary. This 37.4-megapixel full-frame complementary metal oxide semiconductor sensor camera came with a Zeiss Distagon T-Star 35mm f2 lens permanently attached. The integrated Adobe Photoshop Lightroom Creative Cloud was the main selling point, promising to change how photographers approach their workflow. It featured a leaf shutter with physical exposure dials, a 0.74 times full high-definition organic light-emitting diode electronic viewfinder, and a massive 4.34-inch high-definition touchscreen liquid crystal display with a complete toolbar interface. Ultra-high-definition 4K at 30 frames per second. Video recording was included, along with International Organization for Standardization, ranging from 80 to 51,200. Built-in wireless and Bluetooth connectivity were standard, and the camera included an internal 512GB solid-state drive for storage, plus USB Type-C connectivity. The photography world was genuinely excited about this concept. The idea of editing photos directly in the camera using professional software could have completely changed how photographers work, especially those shooting events or working in remote locations where computer access was limited. But the ZX1 became a textbook example of how not to manage product development and customer expectations. After years of delays and missed release dates, the camera finally arrived with an astronomical price tag that put it out of reach for most photographers. The handling was poor and ergonomically uncomfortable, making it frustrating to use for extended periods. Most importantly, the camera simply didn't deliver the revolutionary workflow improvements that justified its existence or its price. But even established brands with decades of experience made shocking mistakes, like Sony's attempt to dominate the vlogging market that backfired spectacularly. Coming in at number 6, the Sony ZVE1 was supposed to be the ultimate vlogging camera that would make every content creator abandon their current setup. Sony marketed this as the perfect fusion of full-frame image quality with features specifically designed for modern content creators, promising to solve every problem that vloggers and YouTubers had been complaining about for years. The feature set was clearly designed with content creators in mind. This 12-megapixel full-frame XMOR-R complementary metal oxide semiconductor sensor was optimized for video performance rather than still photography. It offered ultra-high-definition 4K at 120 frames per second and full high definition at 240 frames per second, both with 10-bit 422 recording capabilities. The 5-axis steady-shot image stabilization promised smooth handheld footage, while the 15-plus stops of dynamic range and artificial intelligence auto-framing were supposed to make professional-looking content accessible to everyone. Multi-face recognition, time-lapse capabilities, and a dedicated product showcase setting showed that Sony had really thought about what creators needed. S-Log3, S-Gamut3, S-Cinetone, and user-loadable lookup tables provided professional color grading options, while the extended International Organization for Standardization ranged from 80 to 409,600 meant shooting in any lighting condition. Internal microphone plus inputs and USB streaming capabilities completed the content creator package. Sony's marketing campaign positioned this camera as the tool that would finally give content creators everything they needed in one package, eliminating the need for multiple cameras or complicated setups. But the ZVE1 failed to live up to its promises in several critical ways. Overheating became a major issue during extended recording sessions, which is exactly when content creators need their cameras to be most reliable. The lack of a mechanical shutter limited its versatility for photography, making it less useful for creators who needed both photo and video capabilities. Most significantly, the price was simply too high for casual creators, while not offering enough advantages over established alternatives like the A7C Mark II or FX30 to justify the cost for professional users. Meanwhile, another brand promised to fix their biggest weakness, but still managed to stumble when it mattered most. At number 5, we have the Panasonic Lumix S5 Mark II, a camera that was supposed to be Panasonic's redemption story after years of criticism about their autofocus performance. This was the moment Panasonic finally added phase detection autofocus to their full-frame mirrorless system, and the photography community was genuinely excited to see if they could finally compete with Sony and Canon. The specifications looked incredibly promising for hybrid shooters. This 24.2-megapixel full-frame complementary metal oxide semiconductor sensor was paired with impressive video capabilities, including 6K at 30 frames per second, 420 10-bit recording, and Cinema 4K and 4K at 60 frames per second, 422 10-bit unlimited recording. The 3.68 million, 0.78 times magnification, organic light emitting, diode, live viewfinder, and 3.0-inch 1.84 million, dot tilting, and free-angle touchscreen. Liquid crystal display provided excellent monitoring options. The 779-point phase detection autofocus system was the star feature, finally giving Panasonic the modern autofocus performance that users had been demanding for years. 5-axis sensor shift image stabilization, International Organization for Standardization from 100 to 51,200, shooting speeds up to 30 frames per second, dual ultra-high-speed 2 secure digital slots, wireless and Bluetooth connectivity, and weather-sealed construction completed the impressive feature set. This camera represented years of development and listening to user feedback. Panasonic had clearly studied their competition and addressed most of the complaints that had been holding back their previous cameras. The expectations were incredibly high because this wasn't just another camera release. This was Panasonic's chance to prove they could build a camera that satisfied both photographers and videographers without compromise. But the S5 Mark II still managed to disappoint users in several critical areas. Overheating issues during 6K recording became a major problem, limiting the camera's usefulness for the exact features that were supposed to be its biggest selling points. The autofocus system, while improved, still wasn't perfect and left some creators feeling let down after years of waiting for Panasonic to get it right. The menu system remained complicated and unintuitive, making basic operations more difficult than they should be. Perhaps most frustratingly, the camera shipped with buggy firmware that caused various reliability issues, requiring multiple updates to fix problems that should have been resolved before launch. But the disappointment gets worse when you see how Nikon handled their attempt at an affordable full-frame camera. Number 4 brings us to the Nikon Z5, a camera that perfectly demonstrates how cutting corners can destroy what should have been a winning formula. Nikon positioned this as an affordable entry point into full-frame mirrorless photography, promising professional image quality at a consumer-friendly price point that would attract photographers upgrading from crop sensor cameras. The basic specifications seemed solid for the price point. This 24.3 megapixel FX format, complementary metal oxide semiconductor sensor, was paired with Nikon's X-Speed 6 image processor, providing the foundation for quality images. Ultra-high definition, 4K and full high-definition video recording capabilities were included, along with a 3.6 million dot organic light-emitting diode electronic viewfinder and 3.2-inch 1.04 million dot tilting touchscreen liquid crystal display. The 5-axis sensor shift vibration reduction system promised sharp handheld images, while International Organization for Standardization from 100 to 51,200 covered most shooting situations. Shooting speeds up to 4.5 frames per second, built-in wireless and Bluetooth connectivity, and dual secure digital ultra-high-speed 2 card slots completed the feature set. Nikon's marketing campaign emphasized this camera as the perfect tool for photographers who wanted to experience full-frame image quality without paying flagship prices. The timing seemed perfect, as many photographers were looking for affordable ways to enter the mirrorless full-frame market. But the Z5 became a textbook example of how cost-cutting in the wrong areas can ruin an otherwise good camera. The cropped 4K video recording made it essentially useless for serious hybrid creators who needed the full sensor width for their footage. The autofocus performance for video was slow and unreliable, struggling to keep up with even basic subject tracking. The burst rate was disappointingly low compared to competing cameras, making it less useful for action photography. Most critically, the camera felt like a watered-down version of the Z6, rather than a carefully designed entry-level camera, leaving users feeling like they were getting a compromised experience rather than good value. However, even flagship cameras from top brands faced massive criticism when they failed to deliver on their biggest promises. At number 3, we have the Canon EOS R5 at launch, a camera that generated more controversy and disappointment than perhaps any other flagship camera in recent memory. Canon marketed this as their first mirrorless camera with 8K video recording capabilities, positioning it as the ultimate hybrid camera that would satisfy both photographers and filmmakers with no compromises. The specifications were genuinely groundbreaking when announced. This 45-megapixel full-frame complementary metal oxide semiconductor sensor was paired with Canon's Digic X image processor, creating the foundation for incredible image quality. The 8K at 30 frames per second RAW and 4K at 120 frames per second 10-bit internal video recording capabilities were unprecedented in a camera of this size and price range. The 400-megapixel in-camera file creation with no additional software was a photographer's dream feature. Sensor shift 5-axis image stabilization, 12 frames per second mechanical shutter, and 20 frames per second electronic shutter shooting speeds, and dual-pixel complementary metal oxide semiconductor autofocus. Mark II with 1,053 autofocus points provided professional performance across all shooting scenarios. The 3.2-inch vari-angle touchscreen liquid crystal display, subject tracking with deep learning artificial intelligence, and CFexpress Plus secure digital ultra-high-speed 2 memory card slots completed the flagship feature set. Canon's marketing campaign was massive, with professional photographers and filmmakers genuinely excited about the possibility of having 8K video recording in a traditional camera body. This wasn't just another incremental upgrade. This was supposed to be a revolutionary camera that would change how professionals approach their work. But the launch turned into a disaster that damaged Canon's reputation for years. The overheating issues were severe and made the camera unreliable for professional video work. 8K recording would shut down after just minutes of use, and even 4K recording suffered from thermal limitations that made extended shooting impossible. Professional YouTubers like Gerald Undone and major review sites like DPR Review heavily criticized the camera, calling out Canon for releasing a product that couldn't deliver on its main selling points. The camera lost credibility with professional video users almost immediately, forcing Canon to eventually release firmware updates that still didn't fully solve the fundamental thermal design problems. But nothing prepared us for how Nikon's flagship attempt to compete with Sony and Canon let down video creators in the most disappointing way possible. Coming in at number 2, the Nikon Z9 represents one of the most frustrating examples of a camera that looked perfect on paper, but failed to understand what modern creators actually needed. Nikon positioned this as their mirrorless answer to Sony and Canon's dominance in the hybrid camera market, promising to finally give Nikon users a camera that could compete in both photography and videography. The specifications were absolutely impressive and showed that Nikon was serious about competing. This 45.7 megapixel FX format stacked complementary metal oxide semiconductor sensor was paired with the X-Speed 7 image processor, creating a powerhouse combination for both stills and video. The 8.3K at 60 frames per second NRAW and 4.1K at 60 frames per second. ProRes RAW recording capabilities were genuinely exciting for professional filmmakers. 8K at 30 frames per second and 4K at 120 frames per second video with 10-bit internal recording matched the best cameras from competing brands. Up to 20 frames per second RAW and 30 frames per second JPEG shooting speeds were perfect for sports and wildlife photographers. The 493-point autofocus system with artificial intelligence-based subject detection promised reliable performance across all shooting scenarios. The blackout-free real-live viewfinder, 3.2-inch 4-axis tilting touchscreen, liquid crystal display, integrated vertical grip, dual CF Express Type-B slots, 5 GHz wireless, Bluetooth, and global navigation satellite system connectivity completed the professional feature set. Nikon's marketing emphasized this camera as the tool that would finally allow their users to compete directly with Sony and Canon shooters, especially in the growing hybrid market where video capabilities were becoming just as important as photography performance. But the Z9's failure wasn't in its specifications or image quality. It was in completely misunderstanding what video creators actually needed from a hybrid camera. The camera was extremely bulky and heavy, making it impractical for handheld content creation, vlogging, or any situation where portability mattered. Video creators who had been excited about Nikon's entry into serious video discovered that the Z9 was designed more like a traditional professional photography camera than a modern hybrid tool. The size and weight made it unsuitable for gimbal work, travel content creation, or any of the shooting styles that had become popular with modern video creators. But the number one spot goes to a camera that fooled millions of people into thinking they were getting the perfect content creation tool, only to leave them frustrated and searching for alternatives. Taking the top spot at number 1, we have the Sony a6400, a camera that became one of the most talked about and ultimately disappointing cameras in recent history. Sony's marketing machine went into overdrive promoting this as the perfect APS-C mirrorless camera for vloggers and content creators, promising advanced autofocus technology and professional video features at an affordable price point. The hype around this camera was absolutely massive. Sony positioned the a6400 as having the most advanced real-time eye autofocus system ever put into an APS-C camera, along with 4K video recording without crop factor, making it seem like the ideal tool for content creators who needed reliable performance without full-frame pricing. The specifications looked incredible for the price point. This 24.2 megapixel APS-C XMOR complementary metal oxide semiconductor sensor was paired with the Bion's X image processor, creating a solid foundation for both photography and video. The real-time eye autofocus and real-time tracking were genuinely advanced features that had previously been limited to much more expensive cameras. The XGA TrueFinder, 2.36 million dot organic light-emitting diode, electronic viewfinder, and 3.0-inch 921,600.180-degree tilting touchscreen provided excellent monitoring options for both photographers and vloggers. Internal ultra-high definition, 4K video recording, S-Log3, and hybrid log gamma recording capabilities gave serious video creators professional options, while S and Q motion in full high definition from 1 to 120 frames per second added creative possibilities. Built-in wireless with near-field communication, 425 phase and contrast detect autofocus points, shooting speeds up to 11 frames per second, and International Organization for Standardization up to 102,400 completed the impressive feature list. Sony's marketing campaign was everywhere, with influencers and reviewers praising the camera's autofocus performance and calling it the ultimate vlogging camera. The photography community was genuinely excited about having professional autofocus technology at this price point, and many creators were ready to switch from their existing setups to take advantage of Sony's latest technology. If you found this video helpful, share it with your friends and family. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.